Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2020 Otter County Community Debates, brought to you by the Fergus Falls Daily Journal, Layton Broadcasting Company, and Pig Access Television of Fergus Falls. On behalf of our sponsors, a reminder, you can subscribe to the Daily Journal digital and print editions by visiting their website at fergusfallsjournal.com or by stopping into their new office within the historic Carnegie Building at 125 North Union. You can also check out their app available online at fergusfallsjournal.com/news app or available through the Google and Apple app stores. Additionally, this and upcoming events will be featured on Layton Broadcasting's AM 1250 KBRF, but make sure to check out their sister stations, Real Rock Z103.3 FM, 96.5 FM KJ Country, and Channel 977 FM. And be sure to catch this and more televised coverage of local news on local channels 8 and 18 from Peg Access. We thank these organizations for their partnership in making this evening a reality. I'd also like to thank the City of Fergus Falls and City staff for affording us this venue for tonight's debate. A reminder that tonight will be the first of 3 debates, with 2 events to follow on Thursday, October 1st and Thursday, October 8th. Like tonight, those debates will begin at 7 p.m., and you can catch the live broadcast on AM 1250 KBRF, Peg Access Television channels 8 and 18, or via the Daily Journal's live broadcast from their Facebook page. And of course, look for ongoing coverage of these events in the days to follow. Lastly, I want to thank everyone at home for making this event part of your evening. These debates were created 2 years ago with the goal of bringing greater awareness to the campaigns of candidates for local and state office. We wish you all could attend in person, but we hope you will find this live broadcast valuable and informative as you make your own decisions in the 2020 elections. Now on to the debate. Tonight's event will feature a debate for 2 significant state offices. First, incumbent candidate Bill Ingebrigtsen and challenger Michelle Anderson will debate for the office of Minnesota District 8 Senator, a region which includes the cities of Perham, Fergus Falls, and Alexandria, to name a few. Then, in approximately 30 minutes, candidates Jordan Rasmussen and Brittany Johnson will debate for the office of Minnesota District 8A Representative, a region which includes Perham, Pelican Rapids, and Fergus Falls, held for the last 24 years by Representative Bud Norris. In a moment, our first candidates will introduce themselves and their campaigns. But first, a quick review of the rules for tonight. My name is R.C. Drews, and I will serve as moderator for tonight's proceedings. As we begin, candidates will be given 3 minutes for opening statements before we move to the debate questions. The questions for tonight's debate have been written by myself and have not been shared with anyone to include any candidate, campaign, or media partner. As such, these questions are my own and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of our media sponsors or their affiliates. Candidates, during the questioning phase, responses will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker, unless otherwise specified. At the 1-minute mark, our official in the front row will hold up a yellow card. When the stopwatch reaches 10 seconds left, he will hold up a red card. Should a candidate exceed the maximum time limit, it will be my responsibility to interrupt out of fairness. While the opposing candidate is speaking, you have the opportunity to move for a rebuttal. In that case, we will allow 30 seconds for rebuttal and afford one final response from the original speaker if they choose before moving on to the next question. Finally, questioning will be from left to right, and we will rotate speakers after each question out of fairness. With that said, Ms. Anderson, you have the floor at 3 minutes for your opening statements.
Great, thank you, RC, and good evening, everybody that's tuning in tonight. Thank you to the Daily Journal and KBRF and Peg Access, and to my opponent, Senator Ingebrigtsen. My name is Michelle Anderson. I live here in Fergus Falls with my husband Spencer and our son Ashton, who's 1.5 years old and who is my inspiration for running for office this year. I'm originally from Dundas, Minnesota, which is a tiny town in southeast Minnesota. And although my family's history in Otter County goes back to the 1800s, I'm a proud homecomer to this region. I love its land and people. They're near and dear to my heart. To the Minnesota Senate, I would bring more than 15 years of nationally recognized rural advocacy and community development leadership. I'm currently the Rural Program Director at Springboard for the Arts, where I oversee our statewide efforts in small business development for artists and creative community development. I'm also very active in the community. I'm the chair of the Otter County Historical Society, and I'm a member of the county's Long-Range Strategic Planning Committee. It's through all of this work and the variety of people that I've met that I became motivated to run for office and to bring my big picture thinking, my collaboration skills, and get things done mindset to the Capitol. As I've campaigned over the last 6 months during the pandemic, I've heard many perspectives, but a few things are clear. The status quo isn't working. Too many people are working day in and day out, only to continue falling behind, because of healthcare costs, low wages, inaccessible housing, and childcare shortages. Minnesotans are also concerned about basic issues like public health being politicized when they just want to see their representatives get things done. I'm not running because I have all the answers to these issues. I'm running because I know it will take all of us to participate, listen, and ask the right questions as we work together to meet this moment and make sure Minnesota comes out stronger than it was before. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the RC as well as the sponsors of this event tonight, and of course the community of Fergus Falls that's listening in, and as well as Facebook. My name is Bill Ingebrigtsen. I'm the state senator for Senate District 8, which encompasses parts of Douglas and almost all of Otter County. I've been in the Senate now for 13 years. And previous to that, I was the 34-year law enforcement and elected sheriff, and I ran 4 times for Douglas County as their sheriff, and retired at the same time. I was, as they said, jumped from the kettle into the fire, right into the Senate. I was very fortunate. Been very fortunate to support and represent the folks of District 8. Right now, I am we're in the leadership role. I'm the chairman of the Environmental Finance, Senate Finance Committee. I also vice chair, co-chair the Senate, total Senate Finance Committee. I sit on the Judiciary Committee, as well as the Capital Investment Committee. I ran for office 13 years ago because I felt the need for an obvious change at that time, running against a very seasoned senator that had represented our area at that time, and I was encouraged to run, and I too also ran and continue to run because of my children and my grandchildren, and now 2 actually great-grandchildren. Marilyn and I hail from northwestern Minnesota. We were high school sweethearts. We've been married now for just shy of 50 years, coming up in February. Raised 2 children and 6 grandchildren, and now 2 great-grandchildren. And I'm very concerned about where this state is going, and furthermore, where the country is going, especially most recently. I'm very concerned about the progressive liberalism that's going on in our state, and so I continue to think that I can make a difference, and will continue to make a difference in St. Paul in many different ways. So I thank Michelle for running. I know this is hard work. These parades and all these things and events are hard work, not door knocking. I don't think anybody really realizes how hard it is. But I appreciate the opportunity here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ingebrigtsen, and thank you, candidates. All right, for our first question, we'll start with an easy one to get the blood flowing. A candidate without a vision for the future is about as useless as a cell phone with no signal. Candidates, if elected to office, what do you see as the #1 issue to promote the economic growth of your district? And keeping with our rotation, Mr. Ingebrigtsen, we'll begin with you.
I think certainly the diversity of our community is growing, and I'm quite excited about that. I think immigrants coming to our area is something that is certainly helping out our economy, because there's a need for workers and a need for labor, and so I'm quite excited about that, so long as they come here legal, and they bring young families and help energize rural Minnesota, which in a lot of cases we need help compared to the metro and suburb areas when it comes to numbers. So, but I'm very concerned. About public safety, and we kind of live in an island. I call it a slice of heaven here in rural Minnesota, compared to only 135 miles from where I work, from where I live in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I know the community has supported law enforcement. They supported it when I was working in that field, and we're going to continue to do that here. And I don't think there's any disputing even in this room about that. But I'm very concerned about where this is going, and I think it's going to have make a big difference on our economic situation if we don't make sure that we stay on track when it comes to public safety for our communities.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Yes, well, as far as economic development in our region, I think it's a combination of helping businesses get through this COVID crisis. Beyond that, really, I think the concerns I'm hearing from the business community and economic development community are the livability of this region. So there's kind of three things that I keep hearing about as I talk to voters. And one is the childcare shortage, and this does affect businesses and employers that either want to locate here or want to expand. They are having a hard time keeping employees that can't find childcare. The other is broadband access. This is huge for rural Minnesota, where the digital divide has expanded even more since the COVID crisis began, obviously. But this is critical to attracting more people that want to live here, especially as people start to look at working remotely. And finally, I would say just infrastructure and making sure that the cities here in District 8 and other rural communities across the state have what they need to keep up with the needs of our businesses and our housing needs. And so to me that includes passing the bonding bill, which would bring us hundreds of jobs. It would help make the region more inviting to people and businesses. And so those three things are critical as we get through the COVID crisis and even beyond.
Thank you. And you touched a little bit on this next question, but I'll read it in full. The advent of the internet changed the way that we work, connect, and do business. And while urban portions of District 8 have significant digital infrastructure in place for the needs of their population, one of the beauties of this region is its lakes and its farmlands. Strong broadband access to these areas may be challenging, but there's no doubt the pandemic and work-from-home alternatives have made obtainable internet access for all a high priority. How do we create a level playing field, and what role would you play? And we'll ask Ms. Anderson, we'll ask you first.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. I definitely have more to say about this. So we are seeing, I think the schools have done an amazing job, first of all, through the COVID crisis, making sure their kids get the technology they need to be able to do their school lessons from home. But we're hearing stories about families that have to go and download their homework at fast food restaurants or the library. And so this was already an issue before, but it's critical now. And this is a bipartisan issue. So, I think the legislator has done some really important work investing in broadband. I think what I'm hearing from some of the people that do the actual installation of fiber is that there are some challenges as far as permits that add to the expenses. And so I think there's some things we can do at a policy level to kind of streamline that process and just continue to invest in the broadband infrastructure. I think there's I believe there's a statewide goal of getting to a speed of 100 megabits per second by 2026, and that seems like a long time from now. I'm definitely for that. I think if we can find a way to speed it up and get there sooner, now that we're dealing with this pandemic and we don't know how long it's going to last, I would definitely support that.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you for the question, and the folks should know that I've been very supportive of broadband, especially rural broadband, and to make a fair playing field with business throughout the state of Minnesota. In this day and age, we should not be out here wondering whether we're going to get in or not now, especially with COVID and the educational system that's going on now. That we just don't know from one day to the next whether it's going to be online schooling or personal schooling. So. I've co-authored several bills over the years, and Michelle's right. We have done as good a job as we can. However, it's always a rural challenge, rural versus metro suburb challenge in getting dollars out to rural Minnesota. I actually lived through the E911 funding mechanism, which took several years to happen, where we can actually have statewide emergency services that can be actually band and hooked together. And that did take some time, and I was very instrumental in helping out with that. So I know that there's a need. It is coming. It's coming in about $30 to $40 million per biennium situation. I don't know exactly how many more million we need, but it's very significant, and I think there's a place where we can find some dollars still, I think, to this day. And actually, we have some COVID dollars that could be spent on it right now, because we're doing the distance learning or excuse me, the online learning and whatnot. So I think that could be utilized. The governor has total control of those dollars right now, and I think some of those dollars actually could be spent on that. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, I just want to add that the Otter County recently did receive CARES Act funding, and they are using some of that funding to set up, hotspots around the district so that people that need to do meetings across the county. I don't know when those efforts are going to be laid out, but some of that CARES money is making it to our communities now.
Any follow-up, Mr.
No, that's fine. That's good.
We talked about farmland and rural populations, and these hardworking people remain critical to society's everyday functions, but their needs have at times fallen behind the needs of others both in this district and in the state as a whole. What opportunities do you see for the state to better support its farmers, and how would you participate in those first steps? Mr. Ingebrigtsen, we'll ask you first.
Well, thank you for the question. I chair the Environment Committee. I'm not on the Agricultural Committee, although my first 4 years I was on the Ag Committee. It was the Ag and Veterans Committee at that time when we were in the minority. So I'm very familiar with the agricultural community. Obviously, I grew up in Kitson County, where I ended up marrying the farmer's daughter. So I'm very, very familiar with farming. If you're a kid in that kind of an area, if you're looking for a job, that's what you do, is you go out and work for the local farmers. So I know the farm is a great place to raise a family. Minnesota is known for that. And what we need to do is we need to have more incentives, and we're working on that, having more incentives for young farmers to be able to start out farming. It's a very expensive business, partaking in the agricultural community. It's not, obviously it's not cheap. And there also has some farmers that have been having some real psychological problems, some financial, because due to the financial problems that they're having, and we've done some funding there as well for those to help out farm families that are struggling with potentially mental illness here. So.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, it's really important we support farmers. They're a huge part of our economy and part of our culture here in Minnesota. Both sets of my grandparents were farmers in Rothsay and in the Sabin area. I unfortunately didn't grow up on a farm because they were affected by all of the transitions so our family was not able to keep farming. They rented the land out. And so I care a lot about the future of farming. I want to see more support for farmers that want to make transitions. So I know that many of them are trying to find new markets, and that can take a couple of years. They want to be better stewards of the land and adopt more sustainable farming practices, which I think is critical to the future of Minnesota's environment and clean water. And so I think we need to recognize how unpredictable those transitions can be and make sure that they get the support they need when they want to make those changes. The other piece that I would mention is I know that sometimes for larger farms it's hard to find labor, and that health insurance can be a big factor in this. And so we really need to find ways to make health insurance more affordable. I think that will help businesses of all types, but particularly farmers. I agree about supporting emerging farmers as well. I know a lot of young people that want to get into the business, and I think there are some good programs out there. I think there's still quite a bit more we could do. And the last thing I'll mention is a little bit about taxes. So I know that one big concern for farmers is the Section 179 conformity, and that makes taxes very complicated, and it would allow them to deduct more from the equipment they buy. So I would support that too.
Thank you. Mr. Ingebrigtsen?
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's not a real rebuttal, actually, but the emerging farmers always come down to visit, and it's always good to see young people starting out in the farming business. There's no question about that. But I've had the distinct opportunity of doing LCCMR funding, which is very interesting. The science that the agricultural community is involved in, and moving into different and more diverse type crops throughout the state of Minnesota. It's really quite exciting, and the science is just amazing to me, and it's just a continuous. But I do agree with the farmers. Excuse
Sorry
me.
to cut you off, but
Okay.
that's the
Yeah, that's fine.
Ms. Anderson, any response?
Oh, no, thanks.
Okay. The next question, we'll have just 60 seconds to respond to. It's kind of a big question, but we are approaching the end of our debate already, this first part of it. The history of America is often a history of conflict within and without. We were born through a struggle for independence, matured through a battle of brother against brother, and this country played its own significant part in international wars that shook the world. Today, there's division in America once more, and while the race for Senate is a race of two parties, the winner of this election will be called on to serve all people of this district. How important is multi-partisan cooperation, and how would you reach across the political divide? And Ms. Anderson, we'll begin with you, I believe.
I think this is the question of our time. I'm much more than my political affiliation. I'm somebody that really just believes in the importance of dialogue and respectful conversation. And I've been frustrated personally to see things like the public health crisis that we're going through right now become a Republican-Democrat issue, particularly with masks and with closures. So this is a time, if there was any time, it's a time for us to come together. My motivation is the next generation, and I don't want to look back and say that we were playing games and trying to win for our party. I want to look back and say that we won for our children and our grandchildren.
Thank you. Mr. Ingerson?
Could you repeat the question again?
Sure. The question is, how important is multi-partisan cooperation, and how would you reach across the political divide?
Well, in the Minnesota Senate, whether you know this or not, or do recall that in 2011 was the first time the Republicans ever had control of the Senate, and I was fortunate to be part of that history. We had it for a period of 2 years. So I know what it's like to work across the aisle when you're in the minority. And if you want to get your initiatives through, you have to work across the aisle with the other party. However, there are some things that I will not budge on, and those are things. The most recent are the defunding, which the DFL is talking about, defunding of law enforcement and supporting that, and not stepping in the way of that. And I think it's a travesty, and I would not be able to work across the aisle when it comes to that. There's absolutely no reason for that. So we do have differences, but in general, you'll find that the legislature works together quite well, but the media does not report that very well. So, but there are days when we pass as many as 80 bills in a bipartisan fashion.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Anderson, response?
Oh, I just want to say that there has not been legislation proposed to defund the police, and I am not personally for defunding the police. In fact, there have been Republican ads and mailers claiming that DFL candidates support this that are untrue, and many of those candidates are trying to, refute those lies. So that's a conversation Minneapolis is having. That's something that I think is their prerogative to have. There's other police reform that I think could be addressing this, but I think that's actually just an inaccurate description of the DFL.
Thank you. Our final questions are for each candidate individually, and we'll focus on their campaign in particular. The time limits will remain the same, though there will be no option for rebuttal to these questions. Ms. Anderson, we'll begin with you. Ms. Anderson, you're known for your work in the arts and, at times, your work for responding to publications of German magazines. But it may be safe to say District 8 is a region comprised of more welders, farmers, and industry workers than musicians or writers. So what in your background will help you to work with the concerns of all this district's populations? And how will you ensure your outreach extends to these industries, which are the backbone of the economy?
Right, well, it's true I work in the arts. The arts are not why I'm running. I'm running to make sure that our residents have the things I mentioned earlier, such as access to childcare, broadband, health insurance, and to speak to the arts, the arts are a field that actually help us understand other people's perspectives and points of view. So you read a book and you can put yourself in the shoes of somebody fighting in the Vietnam War, for example, even if that is nothing close to what you experienced. So my nonprofit leadership also, it happens to be in the arts, but I work with large and complicated and unpredictable budgets on a daily basis. I have formed very robust partnerships across sectors. So my particular organization, we focus on creative community development. We happen to do it through the arts, but we work with public health workers, we work with housing folks, we work with economic development people. So I actually feel that I have met people from all walks of life and have found so much common ground among them all. So I'm really confident that I would serve our district really well with that experience.
Thank you. Mr. Ingridson, your question. You served for many years as sheriff of Douglas County and have a background in the field of law enforcement. It will be no surprise to say that this year, especially, concerns have been raised over the policies guiding the state's peace officers. What change, if any, do you feel could bring about a better relationship between law enforcement and the public? And are those changes to be made at the department or at the state level?
Well, thank you for that question, and that seems to be the real issue right now is law enforcement and the lack of support, if you will. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Otter and Douglas County do not support their law enforcement officers, because I know they do. What we're seeing in the media now, and what we're going to be seeing, unfortunately, here probably real soon, is the kind of violence that's going on in the name of expression, and that is not at all what expression is. Taking a baseball bat to the front door of businesses and burning them down. So we have to do a lot better. Recently, I did help pass the bill in Minnesota that addressed some of the issues that law enforcement had, but without stepping in the way of them actually doing their job. The chokehold was one of the things that was real big when we talked about doing things. And could we do more? Frankly, we need to do more supporting law enforcement, because soon there's going to be nobody wanting to do that. And nobody wants that. We want one of the basic things for our society is protection. And by the way, the arts is something that I've also enjoyed. I didn't realize that rural Minnesota was so artsy, if you will, until about 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, when the legacy amendment was passed. And I've been very, very fortunate to have been part of the funding of rural Minnesota when it comes to the arts, and have received some real good kudos doing that, and really realizing just how important art is out here in rural Minnesota. I had really no idea.
Thank you, candidates. You'll now have 2 minutes each for your closing statements. And so, following our order, we'll begin with Mr. Ingridson.
Thank you very much for the opportunity tonight. I think I'd be remiss not mentioning the groups that have endorsed my candidacy, and it's been a couple of elections they have. The Small Business Association in Minnesota, FNIB, supports me, is endorsing me. The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, knowing the importance of retailers in the state of Minnesota. The Care Providers of Minnesota. I was part of the process along with, at that time, Representative Nornis in funding and catching up with the care of our elderly to the tune of $160 million under the Dayton administration. The Minnesota Farm Bureau is another one. Pro-Life MCCL endorsed in the state of Minnesota. Also, the Minnesota Gun Owners Association has endorsed me, and I'm very proud to always get the endorsement from the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. So with that, I think that pretty much tells folks the amount of work that I've done, and I have a lot to say that working in the Senate has been an honor, but it takes a long time to develop relationships, and that's what it's all about, is developing relationships in the legislature in order to get good legislation for your district and as well as for the state. And I feel very honored to be able to continue to do that, and look forward to having the support to return to St. Paul next year.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, your closing statement.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in tonight and getting informed as you make your decisions this fall for the election. There are a lot of tough things that our state is dealing with right now, but I'm hopeful that we as a state and as neighbors and colleagues can look back at this time and say we came together, took care of one another, and built something better than what we had before. And I know that's Senator Ingebrigtsen's view as well, even if we might disagree on a few things. And when sometimes, lately politics have been feeling like a game, but I know that the hopes and solutions are in the everyday people of this beautiful state. So, so many of whom I've met during this campaign. So people like Chad, who took over his family farm and he's trying to find new markets and be a good steward to the land. People like Eunice, who has barely seen her 85-year-old husband since he was admitted to a nursing home in early March, and she just wants people to wear masks at the grocery store so she feels safe. And people like Drew, who organized a peaceful vigil of 150 people in Fergus Falls for George Floyd, because he knew there were people who wanted to come together and reflect on our responsibility as a community to combat racism. I hope you've learned tonight that, like I mentioned, I'm more than my party affiliation. I'm someone who will work to find solidarity across Minnesota's urban and rural divisions. And I'm someone who will meet regularly with my constituents and build partnerships across sectors. I'm someone who will center the voices and solutions of people who are most affected by the disparities our state faces. And I'm someone who will look at ways to make lasting change because I see my son and I want to look him in the eye in 20 years and tell him I did everything I could during this time to make his future brighter. Thank you so much for listening tonight. If there's anything you want to talk about, feel free to reach out to my campaign, and I hope to earn your vote this fall.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson, and thank you to both of our candidates for participating in our debate tonight. That brings us to the conclusion of the debate for District 8 Senator. There's more to come. We'll take a brief 2-minute intermission as the candidates take the stage, so stay tuned.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Go around the country. Thank you. This is helping. This is on random piece of paper. I don't hear anything. Dog problems, to tangle by trash cans. Oh, I'm fingers by myself. Here's my passport. Are we gonna get new labels?
Is there a battery level? No,
Because bringing us, huh? Sorry, you're doing great, you sound great. Yeah, awesome, thank you.
30 seconds. 30.
Welcome back to the 2020 Otter County Community Debates in the second part of this evening's event. In the last half hour, we heard from candidates Bill Ingworth and Michelle Anderson in the race for Minnesota District 8 Senator. Now we turn our attention to Brittany Johnson and Jordan Rasmussen, the race for Minnesota District 8A Representative. As the rules will remain unchanged from our opening event, we'll jump into the candidates' opening statements. Ms. Johnson, you have the floor, and 3 minutes on the clock.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Daily Journal, to KBRF, and to PEG Access for hosting and carrying this debate. Thanks to my opponent Jordan for being here to talk about good ideas that can help our community. For those of you who don't know, my name is Brittany Johnson, and I am a candidate for the Minnesota House in District 8A. I live in Underwood, Minnesota. I attended the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities, where I studied plant science and applied economics. And then I moved up to Perham, Minnesota, where I got a job as an irrigation technician at the East Otter Soil and Water Conservation District. So there I worked with our local farmers to protect crop yields and also to protect our groundwater. While I was at the Soil and Water Conservation District, I bought my farm, and now I live there, where I raise about 20 head of sheep, primarily for meat and wool. And most recently, I made the move to manufacturing. So now I work swing shift at a corn mill in Wapaton, North Dakota, where I make dairy cow feed and the ingredients that go into puppy food. So it's pretty exciting stuff. But I'm here tonight because I believe that the people of Ottertail County deserve responsive and effective government. And I say that because responsive, effective government has been really important for me in my life. Like so many Minnesotans, I grew up in a family that was really challenged by mental illness and addiction. And my saving grace was that I had a community who cared about me and a public school that was dedicated to my success. So I know just how important these policies are. And so what I want to do tonight is I want to highlight the state legislative priorities that we can pass that will elevate the work that we're already doing in our communities to help people, while also highlighting the things we can do to lift the burdens that some other people are facing around things like prescription drug costs and wages and infrastructure. So I'm so excited to be here tonight, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Rasmussen, you have 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, RC, and also appreciate the media partners that are hosting this event tonight, and thank you, Brittany, for putting your name in the ring and for running. I look forward to the exchange of ideas this evening. I also want to thank my wife, Emma, for being here and all of her support. She's been an awesome partner in this campaign journey, and so appreciate her being here tonight as well. As many of you know, State Representative Bud Nornis is retiring after 24 years of service in the state legislature. I'm honored to be endorsed by Representative Bud Nornis, by Senator Bill Engelbretson, and to be the Republican Party's endorsed candidate this November. As the 6th generation of my family to live here in Ottertail County, I am immensely grateful to be a part of a community that still believes in the importance of faith, family, hard work, and integrity. Those Ottertail County values are why I'm running for state representative. We need someone who's going to fight for our Ottertail County values and priorities at the state capitol. Minnesota families and small businesses have been devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting shutdown of our state economy. Our next state representative is going to face difficult questions on how to jumpstart Minnesota's economic recovery and balance our state budget deficit. I will put my experience as a business consultant and financial analyst to work for the voters here in Ottertail County. We face many issues, but I know that if we look at the budget and are able to find opportunities for savings, that we can avoid the calls for tax increases that too many are making right now. It's going to be an important time to make sure that every dollar is spent wisely, and I promise to the taxpayers that I will do that. Minnesota also deserves to feel safe in their communities. I will oppose radical efforts to defund law enforcement. I will support the brave men and women in law enforcement here in Ottertail County who do their jobs honorably and put their lives on the line every day. As someone with a grandmother in the district, I also know that our aging loved ones have faced many challenges over the past year. I will stand up and protect nursing homes from harmful cuts and ensure that Ottertail County seniors have the care they deserve. On these and other issues, education, transportation, agriculture, I'm ready to lead. I'm Jordan Rasmussen, and I'm asking for your vote for state representative. With your support, I'll take my experience and deep roots in this community and make sure that the next 150 years are as great as the last 150 years have been in terms of opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen. In our last debate, we opened with what I described as an easy question to warm up. But you candidates have had the advantage of watching the first debate go by, so we'll start with something a little more challenging this time. At the heart of every city or home is the foundation on which it is built. The most public-facing components of government infrastructure are our roads, highways, and bridges, and you don't have to listen long to hear concerns about their condition. In an effort to combat losses from the coronavirus pandemic, portions of the state's budget have been committed to projects outside of infrastructure and local government aid. If we are to balance the budget, where do you believe that cuts can be made to ensure roadways and basic services remain dependable and in good repair without creating a deficit? And to keep our order, we'll begin with you, Mr. Rasmussen.
Thank you for that question. And transportation is so important because it's how kids get to school, it's how we get to our jobs, and it's how we transport the goods that are produced in this community throughout Minnesota and frankly throughout the world. I think for me, the answer is prioritizing on roads and bridges. Unfortunately, we've seen Twin Cities politicians spend billions of dollars on light rail systems that actually have declining ridership. And I think we need to prioritize those dollars on the roads and bridges that most people move on every day. I'm opposed to an increase in the gas tax. I know the Democrats down at the state capitol have been pushing and calling for that. That would have an undue impact on folks here in rural Minnesota who have to travel more. And it would increase the cost of doing business and living here in greater Minnesota. So I will work to prioritize our dollars on roads and bridges and not on failing light rail projects.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you for the question. So I commute 1 hour to my job every day. I commute an hour to Wahpeton, and I commute an hour home. I live this. I live our roads and bridges. I was affected when we had construction on County Highway 1, right? I was affected when we have construction on 210. This is really important to me. I drive to work in blizzards in the winter because my plant has to run. I have to be at work. This isn't hypothetical for me. I can't work out of my home, right? So it is important to me that we fund these projects. And unlike my opponent, I don't want to pit rural Minnesotans against urban Minnesotans, right? I don't think that they've proposed their own state taxes to pay for additional funding down there. That's for them to decide. I actually do support indexing the gas tax to inflation. It's what we've done with the minimum wage. Then we don't have to fight about it every year. I'm okay paying it, and I probably spend a lot more money on gas than you do, Jordan. So I do support that. And it might be unpopular, but I do support using the money, the sales tax that we get from all of our vehicle sales to go towards transportation. I think that's really important. I'm all about budgeting. I think that you have to use the money that you get. I use my sheep, I use my land money to pay for hay, right? It is reasonable to use our sales tax from vehicle sales to pay for our roads and bridges.
Thank you. Mr. Rasmussen, your response?
Yes, Brittany, I agree that making sure we have good infrastructure is really important here in this community, but I think we also have to face the fact that we're looking at a $5 billion budget deficit, and we can't always go back to the taxpayers. Increasing taxes is going to slow our economic recovery and put an unfair burden on the families and small businesses that are already struggling right now due to COVID-19. And so I'm opposed to increasing the gas tax, and I think we have to look at reprioritizing our current spending if we're going to recover from COVID-19 and the impact it's had.
Ms. Johnson?
You cannot starve a system and expect it to keep providing for you. It's hard, it's not fun. But in your own life, you invest in things that are important to you, and that's the same thing that the state legislature has to do.
Thank you. For the second question, we've talked about this year's impact on infrastructure, and yet our schools today face a challenge rarely equaled, especially at this scale, in at least the last 80 years. If elected, what steps would you take or recommend to better support our teachers and education staff? What actions would you take or recommend to ensure our students maintain the same high level of education without unnecessary risk? Ms. Johnson, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I am endorsed by Education Minnesota, so I do have the trust of many of our educators to serve the people of our district well. I think our top priority needs to be returning teachers to safe classrooms, and I think that we're down, right? And I don't understand how you can ask people to do more with less. It's not fair. Our teachers are exhausted. We have teachers that are acting as as lunch ladies, who are teaching, who are acting as nurses. We are asking a lot of them, right? And we need to be fair to them. We need to make sure that they don't have to buy their own supplies in their classroom. And we need to make sure that they feel safe going to school. And we need to make sure that our kids have what they need to learn. You know, hungry kids can't learn. Kids that are homeless can't learn, you know? And schools are the most important way to help children escape poverty. They really are, and that is personal to me. And so we can't leave them behind. We have to make sure that we're funding our public education system.
Thank you. Mr. Rasmussen, your thoughts?
I think we all believe that every child here in Minnesota deserves a great education, regardless of the zip code that they live in. And for me, it comes back to making sure that our schools here in greater Minnesota are getting their fair share of funding. Currently, there's an unfair disparity in terms of more dollars going to Minneapolis and St. Paul schools than rural schools here in Otter County. And I think that's something I look forward to working on. In addition, we need to reduce the ever-increasing regulations that we're putting on our local school districts. We're asking them to do more and more each year without looking at the new world we're in and what new rules and regulations ought to be applied. I do think it's important to have the support of teachers, and I'm honored to have a lot of teachers who are supporting me in this race. The funding increases that Brittany is talking about amount to about $6 billion. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that we have a $5 billion deficit. And so if we were to look at that deficit and the increase in spending, it's just, there's no way for Minnesota to pay for it, even if we were to increase taxes. Our budget is only about $50 billion when you look at the general fund. And so I want everyone to understand that when Brittany's talking about the $6 billion increase, that she's expecting that to come from the taxpayers here in Otter County. And I want to make sure to work with local school districts to ensure they have the resources they need and have the flexibility to do their job and educate the next generation of Minnesotans.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Jordan, you and I had the benefit of being funded at that level. We went through public schools when we were funding them at that level. You can't leave this generation of kids behind.
Any further comment, Mr. Rasmussen?
I support greater Minnesota education and making sure our teachers and schools have the resources they need, and I look forward to working with them and partnering with them in the state legislature. I was honored to have the opportunity to be on a committee that was looking at the 5-year plan here for the Fergus Falls School District, and so I'm well aware of the needs of the students here and how we need to create an educational experience for the future for them.
Thank you both. The response to the coronavirus pandemic has varied at different levels of government. For example, the federal stimulus checks sent to qualifying taxpayers or the $200 million COVID relief bill signed by Governor Walz earlier this year. Let us suppose that you were elected to office as the Minnesota House pushed forward a similar $200 million emergency relief bill. Where do you believe that those funds would do the most good? Mr. Rasmussen, we'll start with you.
For me, one of the biggest issues is making sure that local city governments and communities are able to meet their budgetary needs. So right now, a lot of cities and counties are going to be affected by the COVID-19 impact on the economy. And so I want to make sure that they have the resources they need so they don't have to go out and raise property taxes. I think that's going to have a great benefit to employers, to senior citizens on fixed income, to make sure that during this COVID-19 pandemic, their tax bills aren't going up at the same time.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, I certainly could. Suppose that you were elected to office as the Minnesota House pushed forward a similar $200 million emergency relief bill, similar to the one earlier this year signed by Governor Walz. Where do you believe those funds would do the most good?
Sure. When the COVID-19 pandemic first hit, I was actually the one to call Representative Bud Nornis and tell him that the Fergus Falls food shelf had closed. That is not an example of effective and responsive government. So I think it's really important that we keep those lifelines for our community open. I also think that there's a really good point to be made for supporting businesses as they navigate this pandemic, right? They are a significant portion of our tax base. They're going to be really important in getting out of this problem and making sure that that deficit isn't as extreme as projected right now. And so I think that anything we can do to help them is really important. And lastly, we have a lot of schools that are being asked to shoulder a lot of additional expenses in teaching our children, in feeding our children, and in transporting our children. And I think that those schools need to have the support that they need to be able to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Asmussen. Any further comment, or, okay,
Thank you.
once more, our final questions are for each candidate individually, and we'll focus on their campaign in particular. Time limits will remain the same, but a reminder that there will be no option for rebuttal to these questions. Ms. Johnson, we'll start with you. Your background includes a history in farming as well as a time in ag-related operations, as well as the government side of ag-related operations, but your experience in the political sphere appears limited. How do you intend to overcome the learning curve that will be presented by a career in politics? Or if you have experience to that extent?
Well, so I would think that I do have a little bit of experience with it. I was a part of the CPN's policy engagement program when I was at the University of Minnesota, so part of that was interviewing all of our legislators, meeting with them on important issues. Right after I moved up here, I actually organized two community forums with our U.S. Congressman Colin Peterson. And so we talked about the issues. And quite frankly, I actually think we need more farmers in the state legislature. I think we need more working people in the state legislature. Right? We need people who understand what it is like to feel desperate and what it is like to not have options available to them. Because that is the only way our government is going to be accountable to our communities. If we have people who don't understand that, then we're lost. Right? So we need people who have real world experience, whose top priority is serving their constituents, the people that live in their communities. And I can guarantee you that that's my top priority. I can build coalitions. I can figure out the details on the issues. I can do that. That's not hard. What's hard is making sure that you don't lose sight of the people that you're serving while you're down there.
Thank you. Mr. Rasmussen, your history includes a Harvard education and a career path in politics and capital investments, but this suggests your experience in life may be very different from the path taken by many of your constituents. How can you ensure voters that your candidacy will represent more than the interests of big business and society's affluent?
Thank you for the question, RC. For me, it goes back to my family living here in Otter County for 6 generations. And just to give a little background, my father grew up on a farm here in Otter County, was a welder at Shoremaster, and him and my mother started their own small business. My mother grew up on a dairy farm here in Underwood. I went to the Fergus Falls Public High School, and so I've been blessed to have opportunities to go out into the business world and see how economic development happens, how jobs are created. And so I'm proud of my experience in the business world, and I think it'll help me be an effective state legislator, especially facing the budget deficits we are. Otter County values are my values. I married my high school sweetheart. We both went to Fergus Falls High School, and so this is home. And I'm honored to be a part of this community, and it would be an honor to serve them down at the state legislature. And one of the biggest things that has been such a blessing about this campaign is getting a chance to travel all over the district, meet and talk with constituents from all walks of life, and understand the issues and the problems that they're facing in their day-to-day life. And that listening is going to continue as the next state representative for this area. And so I look forward to those continued conversations. Because I don't have all the answers, but I believe my constituents are very smart, and I'll take their answers down to the state capitol and be their voice.
Thank you, candidates. We'll put 3 minutes on the clock now for closing statements, and we'll begin with Mr. Rasmussen.
Thank you. I just actually had the opportunity to get married earlier this month to my high school sweetheart, Emma, and it's great to have her with me today. And, as I was saying, RC, we both grew up here. We want to build a family here. 6 generations of my family have done just that here in Otter County. I know Otter County values and look forward to fighting for them down at the state capitol. I think the choice in this election is clear. Are we going to stand up for our way of life, or let Twin Cities Democrats take us down a path of economic stagnation and lawlessness? I pledge to the voters that I will stand up for Otter County and greater Minnesota values. Unfortunately, the Twin Cities Democrats have shown us that they are willing to raise your taxes, villainize law enforcement, and are going to leave us and our neighbors behind. Minnesota families and small businesses have been devastated by COVID-19 and the shutdown of our state economy. Our next state representative is going to face some really difficult questions on how to jumpstart our economy and solve our budget crisis. I'm honored to be endorsed by the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Minnesota Farm Bureau. Farmers and businesses here in Minnesota trust my experience and my policies to make sure that we get our economy back on track and have a bright future for all Minnesotans. Minnesotans also deserve to feel safe in their communities. I'm proud to be endorsed by Minnesota's Police Association. I'm backing law enforcement, and that's why they are backing me. I know our aging loved ones have faced many challenges over the past year. That's why I'm honored to be endorsed by Minnesota's association that represents nursing homes and assisted living communities here in Otter Tail County and across the state. They know that I'll stand up for our senior citizens. On these and other issues that we've had the chance to talk about tonight, education, transportation, agriculture, I'm ready to lead. I'm Jordan Rasmussen, and I'm asking for your vote for state representative here on November 3rd. And with your support, I know that we can work together to ensure that opportunities are here for the next generation, and that Otter Tail County and Minnesota will continue to be the land of opportunity that attracted my ancestors 150 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen. Ms. Johnson, your final remarks.
Yeah, so thanks again to everyone for being here and for watching at home and for listening on the radio. Thank you to our hosts, the Daily Journal, KBRF, and PEG Access, and thank you to Jordan for being here to talk about the really serious issues that are facing our community. So this is my second time running for this seat. I ran in 2018, and it has been so wonderful to get to know all of the amazing people in our community. And like I said before, I know that if we prioritize state policies that help elevate the work that we're already doing here, there's like nothing we can't do. We have some really serious issues facing our state. We do have the budget shortfall from COVID-19. We do have the same systemic healthcare problems that we've been facing for years that still have not been addressed. We have the same stagnating wages, and we have the same infrastructure and bonding bills that aren't being passed. And what we need to do is get on all those things. Those things matter to me deeply, and they affect me personally, like they affect so many people in this community. I am part of the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. I'm a Democrat, I'm a farmer, and I'm labor, and I'm here to make sure that my party cares for the people in rural Minnesota. I really am. I know that there have been mistakes that have been made, but I am here to work for the people I work for the people who do care very desperately about the minimum wage being tied to inflation, who do care very desperately about having enough funding for our school-aged children. I am here to work for the people who live here. I would be so honored to earn your vote. And our campaign motto is working for people from places that we love, and we mean every single word of it.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, and thank you to both of our candidates, and in fact, all of our candidates for participating tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion of this evening's debate. A reminder that tonight is the first of 3 events, with the next debate on Thursday, October 1st at 7 p.m. That evening will feature debates for Fergus Falls Ward 2 and Ward 3 City Council members, as well as the candidates for Fergus Falls Mayor. On Thursday, October 8th, also at 7 p.m., we'll host candidates for Otter Tail County Commissioner in Districts 1, 3, and 5. We hope you'll join us then, and we thank you for being with us tonight. A quick thank you once more to our sponsors, the Fergus Falls Daily Journal, Layton Broadcasting Company, and PEG Access Television. On behalf of our sponsors, a reminder that you can subscribe to the Daily Journal digital and print editions by visiting their website at fergusfallsjournal.com or by stopping into their new office within the historic Carnegie Building at 125 North Union. You can catch this and our upcoming events on Layton Broadcasting's AM 1250 KBRF. Make sure to check out their sister stations, Real Rock Z103.3 FM, 96.5 FM KJ Country, and Channel 97.7 FM. And be sure to catch this and more televised coverage of local news on local channels 8 and 18 from PEG Access Television. Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd, and we hope to see you all at the polls. Until next week, thank you and good night.